and welcome back to 3-2 Brew. Today we're going to be going over our third week of the Goblin Guide project. We played quite a few matches this week. We ended up with a total of 20 matches. I was on originally the Goblins 1.4 deck. I did take this through the league, and I'm not going to spoil too much, but not overly thrilled with my league performance, sadly. Those videos will be coming not this Monday, but the Monday following. Once that league clears, I always post them afterwards so we don't spoil anyone's decks. But yeah, overall, this week was frustrating to say the least. So let's get into it here. 1.4 was definitely the best version of this deck to date, I think. We had a ton of action we were able to get done and through with this build. I really enjoyed running 4-ofs for a lot of these cards. Felt very good. 4 Lackey, 4 Fanatic, 4 Pile Driver feels very nice. Does make sideboarding relatively easy in some cases, where maybe just a Pile Driver against Sly isn't great because like it just dies to Lavamancer and doesn't get the value you need, so you side that out for other pieces and what have you. So yeah, overall, this deck is the best version to date. I am done with version 1.4. I'm on to version 1.5 now. So some 1.4 statistics. We have a total match record of 14-14. We were 16-12 versus a play versus draw. So we did favor play, which to me is frustrating because this feels like a deck that should be relatively consistent of winning on the play when you have an opening play games. So I feel like having a 50% win record correlated to the play draw is relatively frustrating. And then we also have the game record, which was a flat 33-33. So just wild how that lines up. But yeah, I mean, this deck is relatively difficult from what I'm, gathering so far. What I did notice from this version of the deck is that our Goblin King in the main board just didn't feel as impactful. I really would have. There's a lot of matchups where I just sided out automatically. So I just kind of concluded that Goblin King is not a main board card. In some metas, if you're in a heavy Sly meta, maybe you can win through Sly because you drop it and run. But it's also just not, we're not red heavy. This isn't a super red heavy format when it comes to mountains. Not a lot of people are just playing raw mountains. A lot of dual lands like Carplusian Forest and what have you. I'm not going to knock that at all. But not a lot of people just running straight mountains, or at least fetching them consistently. So, unless you're playing Sly or Goblins, finding a mountain in the wild can be difficult. So, I've seen a lot of blue-white recently. I've seen a lot of black recently, which is awesome. Just haven't had a need for Goblin King in the main board. Which makes me to the second point of my recommendation from, I think it was Aragorn, maybe, of one sharpshooter in the sideboard. I really like the sharpshooter in the sideboard. I brought it in a lot of matches, and it felt like it had a good amount of consistency tied to it. So I am the second version, the version 1.5 of this deck will be taking Goblin King out into the sideboard for a sharpshooter. Goblin King being in at all is just a general question mark. I don't know if I would prefer to have a Skirk Prospector or something like that in that position instead, just to bring it in if we want to try and combo people out with Sharpshooter or what have you. So just a general thought I've been having. Not 100% sure what the actual correct answer is. Let me pull up the statistics here though. So I have this filtered currently to week 3, and this is all the decks we played against and our overall record of just week 3. So this is both 1.5 and 1.4. I went 11-9 on the week with a 55% win rate. This is pretty nice. This is I believe my first version or first week where I actually had a positive win rate. As you can see, we went flat even here week 0. Week 1, we decreased, and then week 2, we got even worse. And then we went back up here week 3. So possibly this is what we will call a turning point, but I'll get to that shortly. We played a bunch of Bruce, and I went 7-4 against them, which is very uncharacteristic. I'm actually gonna have a losing total versus Bruce, but we took down Dead Guy Ale. We lost the mirror. We split our Sly matchup. I played against two different rock versions, split that, beat UG Survival Madness, and lost to U-Tide and Pit Rack, which this game was recorded, and it was definitely a heartbreaker. Felt like we should have won that, but yeah, we had a decent split this actual week. Going in a positive record is very nice in terms of overall feelings, but my overall win-loss is still negative, sadly. We're at 46.58% win-loss when it comes to just raw splitouts. Obviously, we're trending positive, but just an overall general way to look at this is it's still not a positive deck for me. So I do wonder if it's me, like is it my fault that this is turning out this way? This deck obviously wins for other people. So maybe this isn't a deck for me to pilot. I'm not 100% sure, but statistically speaking, we were a lot better this week. This does include the version 1.5. Currently, 1.4 sits at that 50%. 1.5 I only have, I think, 5 matches with, and I'm at 40%, so I'm 2-3 with it currently. Definitely, starting to get the swing of it a bit more, I think, but this deck as a whole makes me feel like I consistently lose to myself. And that's a very, very, very frustrating thing. And it's not I'm losing to myself in play. It's that I'm losing to myself, like my deck, I guess is the best way to feel it. We just don't, sometimes you miss land drops, and that's fine. That's a part of the game. But when you miss land drops for like 5-6 turns straight, you're just losing to the deck. And it's rather frustrating. And it happens to me relatively consistently. At least it feels like. Maybe I focus too much on the negativity, which I'll get to in a second here. But yeah, this deck, I just, sometimes when this deck runs well and you're like, you hit decent lands and you find a war chief or a ringleader in the 60 relatively early, and it gets out and it allows you to develop with not, too much interaction. This deck feels amazing. Like those to me are more high rolls. So, but a lot of the time it just feels like I'm drawing all the junk that I don't want at that time, or I sideboard in and I draw 3 tranquil domains when it's not applicable, like they haven't developed their plan that I need to fight against. So yeah, obviously there's going to be fail cases for any deck, but the fail cases for this deck feel extreme and kind of over the top that I haven't seen elsewhere. When I go to board and I come out and I have a full matrix of how I'm sideboarding in and out versus the top matchups and what have you, I don't feel like this deck is put at that much of a advantage. When I sideboard with something like, the Dead Guy Ale deck I've been enjoying, post board I feel like I can answer almost everything. Yeah, it's not good against blue-white replenish, and maybe it's too slow versus Dreadnought. And it's okay. That's a tier 2 deck. I'm not looking for the craziest of things from that, but I have loads of creature answers. I do have spot removal for enchantments and artifacts. I have added Sabo's Webs to slow down man lands. Like, there's a ton of things that I have added to that deck where post-board, I feel like I can come out. If I see one of those cards in my opening hand, I can at least stabilize through and potentially get to a point of winning on the board state. This deck doesn't. Post-board, I'm not bringing in anything that lets me stabilize or lets me feel like I have a real advantage. Like, let's talk about it. Tormod's Crypt. This card's great when you're playing a graveyard strategy, but it doesn't, advance your game plan. I'm not, like, getting incremental more wins because of Crypt. Crypt is more of a delay thing. That way, if you want to just eat up part of their graveyard, or if you have to shut down their graveyard, that's great. I mean, sometimes it'll lead to non-games, but that's not guaranteed. Pyroblast, Red Elemental Blast, 2 awesome cards, but again, they let you punch through a bit. But if you draw 1, you have 6 mana, and you Siege Gang Commander, and they counterspell, and you Pyroblast, and then they Blue Blast, you're normally out of gas. And it's like, yeah, maybe I'm not finding the right window for it, but at the same time, like, they're not punching as hard as I need them to, I guess. Tranquil Domain's also a defensive card. This card is, sweeping up the pesky enchantments like Oath or really Engineer Plague and stuff like that. It's very, very frustrating to, not draw it when you need it and stuff, which is how it is. That's okay. But again, it's not letting you stabilize normally. Sometimes it is, but it doesn't feel like it. Maybe I'm using it incorrectly. I'll admit to that gladly, but it doesn't feel like it's helped me stabilize. Color the Claw. Now that's a proactive card. It's a reactive card when you actually cast it, but it allows you to play out to the board if you have it in hand, eat a Wrath, and then flash it in and be able to win. That's great. It's a great stabilization card. I'd even consider running 2 of these in all honesty. Sharpshooter is more of a combo piece, but it can also keep certain board states at bay. That's why I like it a lot. And then Pyrokinesis sometimes will open a door for you. I've had it happen, but a lot of times it falls short of what you really need, or you can't target or something weird like that. So I don't feel like a lot of these game plans are helping stabilize or really adding a ton of punch to you out the sideboard. I don't feel post-board games like I have more confidence than pre-board games, in a sense. It's more like, oh man, I'm playing black. I got to bring in Tranquil Domains. I need to deal with their plagues and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's very, very tough in that sense. I don't feel like coming out the board is a great thing for the deck. I don't feel like I'm more advantaged or anything. I feel like I'm actually normally more disadvantaged because I'm having to react to everything that they're doing, and I'm rarely disrupting their game plan, where they can bring in stuff like plagues or sweepers or this or that, which heavily disrupts our game plan. And we don't have any way to really deal with that, sadly. So I've been dealing with the frustration that comes alongside that. I will say in general, maybe my mindset for this so far hasn't been great. I have jammed through a lot of games and I did start out really bad, and I have a negative way of thinking about this deck. Which isn't good. It's never what you want with something like this. So I'm looking to reevaluate the way I look. I'm going to try and play tighter and cleaner. And I've been trying it for a while, but I don't think I'm thinking about my opponents nearly enough and stuff like that. So I've begun to try and be a lot more mindful and, really keep stuff in mind when I'm thinking about and going through and dealing with all this. I do think that buried in this deck is a very good deck. When this deck hits its, high to medium high roll, it feels very good. But if it just hits a medium to medium low to low roll, it doesn't feel great at all. And it feels like I'm playing off my back foot the entire time. And that's very difficult. I know it's a tempo deck, but it's still very difficult to deal with. There's just a lot that goes into this deck in terms of like planning and setup and trying to understand matchup and what they could and couldn't have. This deck makes you think and makes you play super tight, which can, I assume, be difficult on like very long days of playing, which is why I think the people who win with goblins are like probably very good players. It's kind of my assumption. I don't win with goblins, so I think I still have a bit of a skill gap issue, but overall, I think people who are going through a day, yeah, you could run lucky all day, don't get me wrong, but if you're consistently putting up results, I think that you just know the lines and you play extremely tight, like 24/7, and it's tough for people to deal with. So yeah, it's something I think I need to work on my mindset with, and I'm going to try and get through this week, and try and get some more testing and really make this deck feel better in my hands. So I did make some changes here. The only thing I did was I swapped over one Sharpshooter from the sideboard into the main board and one Goblin King in the sideboard then. I don't dislike this idea at all. I think it's pretty rad. I actually think that Goblin King is like a really cool card, but I am just wondering if it's even necessary. And would I rather have an additional Color Other Claw? And I kind of think I would. And just cutting out Goblin King, because I don't think it has enough upside. This 34 over here feels pretty locked up and pretty tight. I really like the 2x Tinkerer main. Drawing him first game can suck in a lot of matchups. it just becomes fodder for you to toss out. But when you do need it against Naut and stuff, if you get it on time, it feels fantastic. And we also have, let's see, 2-time sharpshooter feels really good. I think the ratios here are great. I haven't found any better. Like I did a deep dive on Scryfall not too long ago, and it just like I did a really thorough search for everything that would be pertinent to what this deck would be trying to do when it comes to goblins, and I didn't find any kind of goblin support that was really fitting the matrix we need. Sledder was recommended to me, and it's not bad, but at the same time, like, it's not quite getting where I need to. This Goblin King could also be a Skirk Prospector to try and help us combo out, as I stated previously. Don't know if I want that or if I want one more Color of the Claw. It's something I'm going to ponder about and try and see through this week of testing where things should land and where they should be. So this is 1.5, not a lot of changes, just a swap of a main board and a sideboard card, but it is a different version, so it's got a different version number and a different sideboarding plan. So overall, I'm not optimistic. I'm a bit downtrodden with my results of this previous league and just in general how this deck's been feeling in my hands, but I'm going to continue through and try and get this deck set up and try and play it properly. I do think that there is a lot of decks still had to be had here. It's just very frustrating when you just feel like you're losing to the deck itself. But again, a lot of this is mindset, and I think that I got to have a better mindset around it and try and come in. I do feel like when I queue into a league, I'm defeated by the deck before I even get there. Or queue into a match, I should say. I'm not looking into a match like, all right, cool, like, let's get this. It's like, oh, man, I hope I draw a decent 7. I hope they don't have this or that or that or this. It's just a negative mindset, which I need to work on removing from this. And I think that is affecting my play. So I'm going to try and get that buttoned up and a little bit more consistent. But yeah, we got another week coming. I know this wasn't a super heavy deep dive statistically, but there isn't a whole lot to discuss outside of wins and losses with this. I think probably week 4, maybe we'll do some matchup breakdowns and stuff like that. We'll see how many matches we have. I like to get 100 under my belt before we start talking about anything. But yeah, I hope everybody has enjoyed this. I appreciate you all watching. Please leave me a comment if you have any thoughts or recommendations. I would really appreciate that. So this has been 3-2 Brew. And until next time, cheers.